Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the two Philadelphia retro sets of 1997 and 2009. Now, in the mid to late 90s, there was a bit of a retro surge that was going on. Topps had been doing retro cards, or looks back at cards, for decades already. And starting with 1989 Bowman, they'd started to really explore the world of retro cards and of reprints as we headed through the 1990s. But then all of a sudden in 1997, a number of companies all decided to actually jump out and make retro cards or reprints. And Fleer and Donruss Leaf both decided to kind of capitalize on the idea of retro cards by bringing back old Leaf cards or bringing back Gaudi cards. But Pacific also wanted to get involved with this, and the problem for Pacific is it was still a relatively new company. It didn't really exist in the 70s, it was a 1980s card. And so since they didn't have roots to tie back to, they decided to turn to one of the few brands that people hadn't really touched upon. And the brand that they turned to was Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia cards were kind of a unique phenomenon in older cards on a number of different levels, not the least of which it was only football. It was 4 sets of football cards tacked on at the end of Fleer's initial run of covering NFL cards at the same time that the AFL existed. So these were cards that didn't really have the same mystique that many other sets had because it didn't have a tradition in baseball. So they were able to easily capitalize on this, but unlike the other companies which decided to make very true retro, almost reprint cards, in the case of Pacific, they decided to just take the name and make a retro-esque card, but to do it in the most specific way that they possibly could, which was to make a very modern card, a very modern and dynamic card, but do it in a way that had tradition built into it. So the Pacific set that they made in 1997 is not a nod to anything at all. There is no heritage involved in it, but the cards do have kind of a classic look, so they're kind of fun. Now, at this time, Pacific was adding secondary sets into a lot of their releases. And in this case, they decided to do 2 very distinct sets. So the main set is a 330 card set, and then there's a secondary 200 card set. And the cards are distributed in about a 3-to-2 pattern. So that means that collecting the 2 sets, you're running at a very similar pace collecting them. So it's almost like 2 equal sets, but really the main set is the white bordered set, which I'll be starting with. And it is called Philadelphia. So the main set is a simple white border with a big, very color-rich picture inside of it with a few pieces of text, a logo, and a 2-tone shield with the team logo and the 2 colors of the team. And that is basically the card on the front. On the back, they actually made a very impressive retro card. Now, these are glossy cards, so the back of the card's not trying to be old, but it actually looks like a really old card. It's very effective at that. And that's most of the set. The only other part of the set is that at the end it has league leaders, and these cards have a lot more design and look a lot more kind of classic. But that's the set. That's it. That's the whole thing. And this is a set that can easily be overlooked. About the only thing that's distinctive about this set, about the only reason anybody notices, is that this is the set where the only Adam Vinatieri rookie card exists. And it's a very surprisingly expensive card for this set because it looks very drab. But the cards are well designed, and they tend to be kind of overlooked. In fact, this whole set was overlooked at the time and in the years past. So the secondary set was called Philadelphia Gold, and these were very, very classic modern cards. They're a full bleed, high gloss card with a lot of gold on it because it's Pacific. That's the thing that they did. And they have gold in the logo, and they have a big strip of gold that's not actually a strip. It's a lot of stuff that's going on, but you got to take some time and really look at it. The name is embedded in there, and over on the right side is a football, and the rest of the band is actually little echoes of the football as if it's flying through the air. And then they have a little ribbon that flips over the football with the team name in it, and that is basically the card. That's pretty much all that they do with the card. The back is a very modern card design, very impressive, very modern, no effort at all to try to make it look old. But the card front does have kind of an old quality to it. But the Philadelphia Gold cards are not about the cards. This is the classic Pacific portion where it's all about parallels. And there are 3 different parallels. So you have the base gold, and then you have a silver, you have a bronze, and you have a red version of these, where all of the gold foil changes to the other color. And that's it. Those are the 2 sets. They also had 3 insert sets, only 3 insert sets, so this is a very brief set that they made. The first insert set is photo engravings, and these are cards that are rounded off, kind of like playing cards, and they are a cardboard surface. They're a rough cardboard surface with a bit of a pattern to them. So they're not quite like the 1997 Fleer cards. This actually does have a pattern worked into it, so it feels like a very well-made, well-crafted, well-thought-out card. And the cards are very busy, but busy in a wonderful way. The cards are intended to have an old quality and a new quality combined together, and they do that just in many, many different complex ways. I'd love to spend time really talking about this card, but there's really no need to. If you care to, exploring these cards is really good. They also had a second set, which was called Heart of the Game, and Heart of the Game is about as modern as you can get. It gets back to the same high gloss, full bleed card design that the gold set was, and it has a logo on the front, it has some few things on the front, not really much, and then on the back it basically has one of those newsprint headline approaches to the card back, and that is the card. It's not much beyond that. Nice, but not like the other two insert sets, which are really kind of retro. Speaking of which, Milestones is the third, and Milestones, in my opinion, this is really the best of the insert cards in this particular set. It's another busy card, and the big distinctive quality is the gold ribbon that kind of makes an S pattern through the middle of the card. But other than that, there's a lot going on, but they do a really good job of combining old and not too much new, except for the actual card construction itself. And the colors are really well worked in there, working the various team colors in. At the end of the day, this card works really, really beautifully. But again, they did a lot, and they succeeded with it. But that was all that they did for this set. They used the Philadelphia name only as an excuse to make cards that really stretched their designing creativity. And I think they succeeded, but again, this was a set that nobody really noticed at the time, and it doesn't really get noticed in the years afterwards because it's not flashy. And because it didn't sell well, there was no future for this. Now, in truth, Leaf didn't bring back their cards. Gaudy only had 2 sets in 1997. They didn't come back. Retro cards are kind of tough to really make work unless you commit to them 100% like Topps did with Bowman, but even with that, Topps did a retro card, and then they went basically modern for the rest of the time with Bowman. So doing retro cards is kind of a rarity. It's usually when you're doing things like Topps Archives that you're actually able to really create a consistent path down the road. So Philadelphia had a brief moment with a whole nother company, and then it disappeared until it got resuscitated again by another newer card company, which was Upper Deck. So in the late 2000s, 08, 09, there was another resurgence that was happening with Topps Magic, with National Chickle popping up, and Upper Deck wanted to get into that game, and so they decided to also turn to Philadelphia. But unlike Pacific, which just used the name as an excuse to make up some oldish kind of cards, Upper Deck decided to actually do retro cards, to actually go back to the original 1964 Philadelphia set, the first one they made, and make cards very much based on them and almost identical to them. And the cards they made were very successful in that way, but Upper Deck had its own qualities that they tossed into it. So the first thing is the card front is almost identical. In the original 1964 set, they had a big picture with a color bar on the bottom, and the color bar had all of the basic information of the player in it. It also had no logo on the front. Upper Deck made basically the exact same thing. Color bar on the bottom, big image on the top, but you can already see that while Philadelphia did great portraits back in the day, Upper Deck went with a more modern action shot. And it doesn't carry in the same way. It still looks good, it's just it doesn't have the same strength that the original cards had. But a far greater distinction is the fact that in 1964, Philadelphia did one color for each team. So every player in one team had the same color, and then it went to the next team with a whole nother color for that team. So the colors changed from team to team. In the case of 2009, Upper Deck decided to go a different route, and they used 5 different colors. And they repeated those colors. So they start off with red, and then yellow, and then on, until they get to the end with orange, and then they repeat again with red and yellow and on. So every single card, number 5, 10, 15, 20, etc., has a red color at the bottom. Every card that is 1, 6, 11, 16, and on is yellow on the bottom. And what this does for the teams is it means that the teams are constantly changing color by color for the first 5 cards, and when you get to the 6th card, color continues again, so the teams never look cohesive, and that's the big problem that I have with the set. Otherwise, it's a cool idea. Cards did come out pretty well. They even went with a rough cardboard stock, which means the cards feel old. That particular choice that they went with by having the colors constantly varied is a weakness that I just can't get past myself. Otherwise, the cards turned out great. And on the back, they took the 1964 design and they made an adjustment on the design so that you look at them and you can tell exactly what set they were going off of. And there isn't really a lot of difference. The main difference is the fact that the 1964 cartoon in the question has been removed and they just have the question, which gives them a little bit more real estate on the card to use for these modern cards, as well as the fact that they went with just a write-up of the player as opposed to having the stats, which they'd done in 1964. So that's basically the card design itself. Now the set is a 400 card set, and they started off with 200 cards of just general players, and then because this is what they were doing at the time, the cards 201 through 400 are all a lot more rare, but they're all equally rare. So basically you have the first half of the set at 1 rarity, and then you have the second half of the set at a much greater level of rarity. From 201 to 275, those 75 cards are all rookies. And these are rookies all in their college uniforms. Obviously, team color doesn't associate with any of the bands on the bottom. Fortunately, they do have the college logos on it, so these don't look too bad. But they're all color photos. And then the last 25 cards of this 100 card block is veterans. And it's recent veterans and longtime veterans. Color pictures again. And then the set gets really crazy. There were a lot of things that they were looking to in this particular year. And the first thing was they wanted to honor President Barack Obama. Now make of that what you will, and please don't comment in the comments below about him. We don't need to go into that. But for good or for bad, they started off with 25 cards of Barack Obama, 301 through 325. And then, because it was the 40th anniversary of 1969, the next 5 cards are talking about Woodstock. And then again, because it's honoring 1969, they then follow that up with 10 Vietnam cards. Then they have 11, I don't know why 11, but they have 11 political rivalry cards. And then they close out that last group with 49 Stars in Action cards. And the Stars in Action cards are just a simple border around a picture with nothing else on it. And on the back, it talks about the player on the front. And that is pretty much the set. But it's kind of a crazy last portion of the set because you've got some president cards, you've got some presidential election cards, well, not just presidential elections, but various elections from the 60s. You have Vietnam War, you have Flower Children. It's a really interesting thing that they did. It was a lot of ideas that they had, but this set does feel very cohesive. In some ways, it's kind of annoying collecting a football set and you got to get Vietnam War cards, or you got to collect all of this president for, whether you like the president or not. These aren't football cards, and that can get a little bit old, but at the same time, there's kind of a freshness to their doing this. But just in case it wasn't crazy enough, now we got to move on to the insert cards. So the main insert set was another retro look. It was actually National Chickle. And these cards are almost square in proportion. They're a little bit smaller than the cards that we were just going through. And these are very basic art cards. So these don't have photographs on them. They have artistic drawings on them. And they just have the name of whoever or whatever on the card. And then on the back, there's a simple little write-up. And that's all there is to these cards. But it's the topics that are really crazy. So the set starts off with significant politicians, primarily politicians from the 60s, and then it follows up with famous cars, and then it follows up with famous planes, and then it follows up with famous trains. And then it has some veteran cards, and then it closes out with some rookie cards. Again, all of these are artistic drawings, and what's really neat about these cards is that while the main set had some nods to this, this really does capitalize on the fact that back in the 50s and the 60s, sports cards were not this unique event. People collected all sorts of cards, and so it's very common to have cards of trains and cards of cars and those types of things. And so collecting these all together in this helps you get a feel for the wide range of cards that existed at this time. Cards for sports would become far more dominant in the 80s and 90s, but at this time it was a lot more broad-ranging. They also had some autograph cards. They had veteran cards, and then they had rookie cards. And all the rookie cards are numbered out of 100, while the veteran cards are varying rarity. And you can tell the cards in part because the serial numbering on the front. Now this is a handwritten serial number. This is not stamped. But also on the back, they have the hologram in gold, and they have a little write-up saying congratulations. So these are very much official autographs. They also had full-size autographs as its own insert set, and these were designed specifically for autographs, so it's very easy to tell. They also had fabric cards, which had, in my opinion, a better design than the autograph cards. In both the autograph card set and the fabric card set, on the backs look basically the same. There's no confusing them because the fabric card is very thick and the autograph card has, an autograph on it. But other than that, they clearly are intended to be kind of peas in a pod. And then the only other insert that they did was actually an insert into hobby boxes. And this was a very large format image. And when I say image, that's exactly what it is. It is a simple border with a picture inside, nothing else on it. And you have to turn it over onto the back and find that just a little area on the bottom tells you the card number, etc. It's veterans and then it's rookies. And these are autographed as well. So kind of like the National Chickle, these cards are autographed, and you got to look down at the bottom to see the official note that yes, this was autographed. But that was basically what they did for the 2009 set. And so what's really interesting about Philadelphia is you have the 1960s cards, which were their own little thing, very unique. And then you have Pacific's wildly out there idea for doing retro cards, which was its own amazing thing. And then you get to Upper Deck, where they did a completely different idea, which was to get very, very true, very honest with the cards that they were making and make a lot of comments about the era. So it's fun to look at the progression of Philadelphia, which was not a continuation of the company. It was totally different ideas by completely different companies. So it is fun to do that. And if you haven't explored these cards, they are really neat cards to explore, so definitely check that out. So if you're curious about the 1960s Philadelphia cards, I've already done a video on that. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. And likewise, check out other videos if you haven't taken a chance. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you like this video, I certainly hope that you'll hit the like button. And if you got any insight into this or any takes on it, by all means, let us know in the comments below. And thank you very much for watching.